Phil McCabe is in the studio. Good morning, Phil.
Morning, Aaron. How are you?
Pretty good. How are you this morning after the news yesterday?
Oh, good. Yeah. It was definitely a pleasant surprise again.
Now, see, I was met by June, who's part of the KASM organisation, yesterday afternoon, and she told me the news, and I was like, she was all excited, and I was like, do I be excited because it's actually a sensible, logical decision, and I shouldn't be surprised? Or, I was thinking, why am I surprised? Why should there even have been this issue that we're worried that logic would not prevail? Yeah,
it was a silly proposal, from the beginning, similar to the Black Sands one on the West Coast, but it actually, the scientists that we talked to and had working for us really thought it was potentially more destructive and it was a more valuable environment. So the more I look at it, the more stunned I am that they went for it. They're putting themselves against another industry. They're doing it in a protected area. They basically want to remove the nutrient source that has provided a unique marine environment and trying to pretend that it will have no effect. Yeah. Well, I was doing a radio interview yesterday and the guy said, what do you think about Chris Castle, the CEO of Chatham Rock Phosphate, saying that it's akin to putting a road through a block of bush? And I was like, really? It's like, they literally were removing the parts, the component of the seabed that actually provides the habitat, provides the spaces. They're taking the little stones, the little nodules of phosphate out of the seabed, and putting the small stuff back, which doesn't actually leave any nooks and crannies for the creatures to exist. And those creatures are sort of the base creatures at the bottom of the food chain that sort of set the it's part of the whole food chain. And
it's the basis of it. You've got the base of the foundation. Yeah, it's more like taking the topsoil out of the whole bush. Yeah, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, it's like taking big chunks of the topsoil out and then throwing a bunch of stuff that has that will dampen the rest of the topsoil, and it's spreading it over a wider area. So, yeah. Yeah,
But did you manage to convince the interviewer you were talking to yesterday of this?
I doubt it.
Who were you talking to?
There was News Talk ZB, and I guess they're a little bit on the other side of the fence. He was quite a...
That's what they're paid to do.
Yeah, have a stab at the environmentalists, yeah.
Oh, dear. It just... I don't know. Certainly, having been properly informed about it, the whole thing looks ridiculous. But that's the problem, isn't it, is getting everyone properly informed. Getting
people informed. There were posts yesterday, people saying, this is another example of New Zealand being held back, and it's not. I think this decision was actually good for New Zealand's economy, and it was good for the progress of New Zealand, because the proposal was destructive and it was a backward step. It was maintaining what's been going on for the last century or more of destructive human activities, whereas we need to be putting those investment dollars in things that are advancing society and progressing toward a more sustainable way of being. So. That proposal, had it got given the go-ahead, it would have undermined New Zealand's international image. It was a destructive, it was New Zealand. If it had been granted, it was New Zealand disregarding a protection that was put on an area and destroying it, and that would have been blown up in international media. But the result of this was that we actually stood by our guns and held our protection area and protected the environment. So,
who do you think advised this? Well, the company was formed specifically. Chatham Rock Phosphate was formed for this endeavour. Who do you think advised them that they had a good chance of being successful?
Well, goes back to the 70s. NIWA had done research and found these phosphate nodules existing in the Chatham Rise in the 70s, and there'd been a few sailings out there where they'd done research and stuff, and then I guess the guy Chris Castle, who's the CEO, he's not a miner, he's just a guy with money and an idea, and so
where's he from?
He's from Nelson, that area.
Okay,
he's a Kiwi, but they're not. Your question is who advised them? I guess the government has been courting this type of activity. They've been putting out to the world where we've got minerals, we've got oil, we've got wealth in that area, come and get it to the world, to these companies, and they've gone around the world.
Well, that's another stupid thing. Isn't that that's a traitorous act to invite overseas companies to come and take our resources, isn't it?
They went on a world tour, Aaron. They went on a world tour inviting, talking schmoozing,
the mining industry.
And then they put on a taxpayer-funded conference explaining how these companies get through our regulatory process. And so it was it's a long-running agenda that the government's had to expand the whole mining and oil industry in New Zealand, and this particular activity of mining the seabed is a destructive activity, and there's no two ways about it. It destroys environment, it destroys habitat, and it just was wrong. It was a misguided attempt by the government to do it. They just didn't really know what they were promoting, I think.
Do they yet?
I think they've all the information's there. The EPA knows, the Environmental Protection Authority knows, but they're not actually government. They're just an arm. They're an independent body outside of government that they set up. But the government themselves, what's going on now is that Simon Bridges and Nick Smith, they're making movements toward changing the legislation. Stratera, who's the lobby group for the mining industry in New Zealand, they put out a press release late yesterday saying the EEZ legislation needs to be fixed. But
that's their own legislation, isn't it?
Well, no, it is. It's the national government's legislation, and they put it in. And there were concerns around the legislation that it was too soft, too easy for companies. But even with their own legislation, this activity can't get passed through. It's because it's a bad activity. It's destructive. There's no two ways about it.
And two companies now have turned up with
$100 million between them.
A useless application because they can't answer basic questions.
Well, that's it. And so
that's what keeps staggering me about it is has no one on that side of the fence actually worked that out?
Yeah. Well, what they've got to prove is that the effects are no more than minor, and you've got to understand the environment first. You've got to have a really good understanding of the environment, what exists out there in the first place, which that work hasn't been done in either of these cases, and it hasn't been done. The ocean's a big place, and it's a dynamic place, and it's a very complex set of things that are going on in the ocean that you have to try and understand and predict. And then you've got to put an activity that's never been done in the world, seabed mining, into that environment and try and figure out what the effects are. And so it's a big ask, and I think the underlying thing with these two applications, and it was stated clearly in the first TTR decision, this application was premature, meaning we as humans don't understand the ocean environment to a level that we can interact with it like this, and so we need more time. And that's why KASM's pushing for a moratorium on seabed mining, because right now we don't understand it well enough to even consider this activity.
So how would they change legislation to make it easy?
I think what they would look at doing would be reduce public participation, reduce the ability for public to participate in the application process.
Right.
And just, there's a couple of clauses like when there is high levels of uncertainty, the decision makers have to favour caution.
Yes.
So when they don't, when they're not sure, they've got to favour caution rather than, so those sorts of clauses could just a word change would potentially make these proposals go through.
You change should to something else.
What's that?
You change the word should to something a little.
Well, it was must favour caution.
And
maybe
change it to might.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. This is how these things happen, isn't it?
Oh, it's just subtle changes that make a big difference. And the company and Stratera and an organisation called Business New Zealand, they've been scaremongering in the media yesterday and today, saying that this indicates that New Zealand's closed for business and international investors won't invest in New Zealand. And I was saying, look, these proposals were inappropriate, and these decisions have provided a a pivot point for the investment compass to realign itself to a more appropriate investments, more appropriate proposals. That money will still flow into New Zealand, but it will flow toward proposals that are advancing, society in a positive way, not in a destructive way.
Well, it's not New Zealand's fault that there's been 2 silly applications, and I'm sorry, I'm not even going to pretend to be unbiased here on the side of the microphone. They just seem absurd. I don't understand.
That's why the Raglan community was completely up in arms in 2004, 2005, when the idea of seabed mining first hit public consciousness, and it was like, what? You want to do what with the seabed? That was my reaction, and I think that was the reaction of most people. And it's in the work that we've been doing the last few years of talking to people about this issue, people just look at you like, what are you talking about? They don't understand. If they hadn't heard of it before, they just can't. It takes a while to grasp the concept, and it really is only a concept at this stage. And
so is this sort of thing like mining the seabed for iron and the Chatham Rice situation, phosphate, is that done in the sea anywhere in the world?
No, not nowhere on the level or the scale of what they've proposed here.
Okay.
There's a proposal for phosphate mining off the coast of Namibia, but the Namibian government put a moratorium for 18 months on phosphate mining because they were wise enough to understand that we're not ready. We need to get our heads around this before we...
This is a presumably third world country.
Yeah.
With a little more common sense.
Interesting. And I think there's one thing that does occur off the coast of west coast of Africa. It might be Namibia, I'm not sure, but they do mine for diamond off the coast. But there's an incredibly strong current that disperses the sediment that's redistributed. So it's a different environment than what we have in New Zealand here, and each case will be different. Like the west coast proposal was in 20 to 40 metres of water, the depth, and it was in an area that had certain things going on and certain currents and stuff. And then this Chatham Rise one was in 400 to 450 metres depth, and it was a very stable environment where there weren't strong currents, and the creatures that evolved there couldn't, because it was a stable environment and really clear water, they couldn't cope with any sedimentation. They couldn't cope with the dust.
Yeah.
Basically it's like following a car on a dirt road.
Yeah.
It's unpleasant. And
you couldn't live like that.
Well, you couldn't stay if you just walked behind a car all your life. Your lungs, after a certain amount of time, your lungs would clog up, and you wouldn't be well.
Yeah. So one of the comments I see that was made was one of the people from the Chatham Rise company, I think it was saying that this is, you're saying it's bad for New Zealand investment, and young people aren't going to be able to get jobs. So how many jobs were there for young people from the Chatham Rock phosphate proposal?
That's it. They had one boat operating that I didn't actually read what the numbers of jobs were, but the TTR one, which was a bigger volumes and a bigger proposal, that had 50 jobs essentially, and they weren't for young people. Maybe they were for experts in their field. They were for engineers and that sort of thing. Which, they did the TTR one. They said there will be no jobs for the unemployed people along the coast. So it wasn't benefiting the coastal communities. It was generally fly-in or people migrating to the area with the skills. But yeah.
And how many? Has anyone done any research on how many jobs might be lost from the fishing industry in the Chatham Rise? Because that's quite a rich fishing area, isn't it?
Yes, something like 60% of the commercial fish caught in New Zealand waters is caught around the Chatham Rise, which is massive, so it's a really important area for fishing. And I'm sure, I don't recall the information, but the fishing industry would have indicated what the effects that would have had on them, and that was part of the decision as well, that it was potentially going to affect the fishing industry. And the decision also stated that the economic benefits of the proposal to New Zealand were modest at best, meaning actually there was bugger all economic benefit to New Zealand.
Yeah, and that's another thing that seems to be...
not worth the risk or the damage that would have come.
That's another thing that seems to escape people's attention for this application, the seabed mining, and when they were doing the seismic testing for oil off the coast here and down in Dunedin, and all the proposals to do more was it foreign companies.
Yeah.
It's
Chatham Rock Phosphate is a New Zealand company, and the CEO is a New Zealander, but I think something like 50% of their shareholdership is foreign. And the company they were in partnership with a company called Boskalis, which is Dutch, and Boskalis was going to do all the work, and for at least the first 5 years of the operation, the Dutch staff from Boskalis were going to run the ship, and so it was. There you go. That's the answer right there. All the staff on the ship were going to be Dutch to start with, anyway.
Do you think the fact that what's his name, Chris Castle, is not actually from the mining industry? Do you think that's a large part of why such a foolish application went as far as it did?
It was speculation. That's essentially what it was. It was a speculative proposal. It was like, this is a good idea. We could make some money here. Anyone want to make some money? And people threw money at it, and they didn't. He hadn't done his homework, and
Should anyone who wants to do seabed mining in New Zealand now just ring you first, Phil? Do you think?
I reckon that'd be good. Well, we were approached a year and a half ago, by some research people from Singapore, were wanting to talk to us about seabed mining in New Zealand, and they were consulting or researching for investors.
Right.
And I was like, nah, that's all right, thanks. They were going to pay us to talk to have a meeting with them and everything. I was like, nah, that's fine, thanks.
Okay.
We don't really want to give you information. All I did really was send them an email that said, look, if you do consider seabed mining in New Zealand, you will face staunch opposition.
Yeah. And to be fair, anyone who's looking to invest money, that's some information they should have checked out.
Oh, yeah.
Beforehand. A sensible investor would do that. Yeah. I feel.
Yeah, it was interesting when TTR was, advancing towards putting their application in. They had a shareholders meeting in New Plymouth, and the media release was that they've invited all the groups that are potentially opposed, but they didn't invite KASM.
Huh.
Right. And if we were there, it would have been really fun confronting Jenny Shipley and the other directors.
Yeah. No, they know that.
Yeah.
Okay, so for KASM, and all the people of Raglan, there's a lot of effort goes into this. Last time the TTR one was turned down, and within a few weeks the Chatham Rise one popped up. What are you expecting? And are you expecting them to want to fight it, given that TTR gave up in the end?
Yeah, well, I think the Raglan Community and KASM have worked very hard on both of these proposals, and that was wonderful. But what to expect? Chatham Rock Phosphate would like to appeal, I'm sure. It was a pretty conclusive decision.
Yeah. And
they can only appeal on points of law, so there has to have been something done wrong within the hearing that, a
mistake by the decision-making committee.
Yes, essentially, for them to have a valid appeal reason. The other point is that the shares went from being worth 20 cents a share to 1.5 cents a share yesterday.
Right.
And so the value of the company is now only 2.5 million or something like that, which is, and it had cost them several million to run a successful appeal, probably, and at the risk of having to pay costs to anyone else, the legal costs. So I don't think I don't know, but I doubt whether Chatham Rock Phosphate has the ability to appeal.
Right, the actual resources to do it.
Yeah, I'm just hoping. Maybe that's just a hope.
I'm sure everyone in Raglan hopes that.
Yeah, and TTR have said that they are going to reapply. Again, I question their ability to do that because we don't think they have much money, and we don't think any investors will jump in behind them. And we know that their company has been gutted, all the staff are gone, the CEO's gone, Jenny Shipley's gone. So it'll be a big uphill task for them to put together another application.
And certainly investors will be wary of anything in the seabed.
After two decisions against it. And now what will happen is that these companies will lobby hard with Stratera on government to change the legislation and have a juggle, have a fiddle with the EPA, the organisation.
How does the other side, the communities that are opposed to seabed mining, how do they lobby hard in the other direction, do you think?
I've never done it before, so I don't really know. I think you just kind of write letters and you just write letters probably.
KASM doesn't get to have a dinner with the minister?
We could push to communicate with government people as well, and potentially meet with them. I know the Green Party is calling for a moratorium alongside us, and the Labour Party put out a good press release yesterday saying that it was the right decision. So we could get in behind those parties and just kick up a fuss.
Okay,
really.
That's because I'm well aware that the industry uses its lobbying ability to get a lot of stuff done, and we don't know the conversations that occur and all that sort of thing. So that's they're very well organised and well funded to do it, and we're a bunch of surfers and hippies from the West Coast with no money, Yeah. Is KASM all right financially at the moment?
At the end of it, I think we're at the end of all of that work we've done in the last couple of 3 years. We're financially slightly better off than we were when TTR raised its head initially.
Okay.
So I think we're okay, but I don't think we have a lot of funds to run another big campaign. And if anyone wants to drop some money into the KASM account, that'd be helpful, because we do have some work to do to maintain the integrity of the legislation and of the EPA. Another interesting, kind of spin on it all is that this will have international implications as well as a precedent setter. If New Zealand, a country that cares, in theory cares for its environment and is conscious about it, and if seabed mining as an activity is unacceptable here, proven to be unacceptable twice through two proposals, then what does that mean for the rest of the world that is scrambling right now to get their hands on the marine minerals that are out there? So
they should try recycling.
Oh,
is that what it means?
Yeah, I think that they could also change a couple of words in legislation around waste minimisation legislation and say you must recycle aluminium and tin and steel and so on, rather than you may.
Because that's actually an issue, isn't it? Whether for the iron that they were looking to mine, there is plenty of resources in the waste stream still. That I remember you guys saying that.
Yeah, and all the sort of rare earth minerals that they're looking for in other parts of the world. All that stuff is in e-waste as well. Let's just pull apart the stuff that we're dropping into landfill and reclaim those bits before we continue, degrading the environment.
Is the mining industry stuck in a time warp, or?
I reckon they are.
The people who are making the decisions.
Well, I mean, they've got machinery, they've got infrastructure, they've got all the stuff that they want to make use of and make money from. They've got huge investment in all this stuff, and they've got huge debt attached to it all, and they've got an economic imperative to continue growing, but it's at the expense of the planet, which is at the expense of humankind and all other life on Earth.
But they've got a quarterly report to get into their shareholders.
They do. It's really important. So they're pretty bloody driven, and they've got the resources to do it. So, but I think it's pretty interesting that a middle New Zealand mainstream organisation, an official organisation called the EPA that was set up by a right-wing government. I think it's really interesting that they made two very good, conscientious decisions.
Do you get a feeling
in favour of the environment and against industry? And
was it the same people both times?
Well, it's the EPA. I don't think. No, it wasn't this. No, different decision-making committee.
Okay.
Completely different decision-making committee. But the decision-making committee is on some level guided by the EPA staff. You know, there are experts among the EPA staff who follow all the information and follow the whole hearing process and report to the decision-making committee, saying, you know, with expert advice as well. So they do inform the decision-making committee further than, you know.
Do you get an inkling of what the feeling is behind the scenes at the EPA? Do they feel slightly surprised at how thin the applications have been?
Well, the first, through the hearing process, the EPA staff make 2 reports about the application to the decision-making committee to help the decision-making committee, you know, make a decision. And the first staff report was damning of the CRP, the Chatham Rise.
Yeah, actually, I remember that came out. Yeah,
and there was a big. The company kicked up a big fuss about that, and you know, as they would. But the fact is, I mean, it just comes back. It just keeps coming back to the fact that we don't know enough about the environment that they're wanting to work in, and the activity that they want to engage in is destructive, and there's no two ways about it. It is destructive. It destroys environment. It destroys habitat, and that's, you know, when we think about the planet and the world and the state of it, and every time you look around, every time you turn on the radio, there's issues, global environmental issues and so on, and to continue with activities that just perpetuate and accelerate those problems, it just doesn't make sense. So what I was getting at was, it's interesting and it's heartening to see that an organisation like the EPA have made 2 good decisions. Yeah,
it is.
It's hopeful.
All right, so can you relax a little bit now for a little bit? You know,
yeah,
couple of days?
I mean, I wasn't overly involved in the Chatham Rise application. It was
right.
We did a lot of work on the TTR one, and did do, you know, a reasonable amount of work. But the people who really did the work on this, June, who's a KASM committee member, she did a lot of work early on in the process, and Malibu Hamilton did a lot of work, and those are the people from Raglan who did a lot of work on this, and then our legal team of Duncan Curry and Ruby Fife did a huge amount of work.
Who've taken something of a pay cut to do this work.
Oh my God, they're probably getting paid a few dollars an hour.
Right.
Literally, and they're professionals and very, very good at their job, and it's beautiful but wrong.
Yeah, I know what you mean. All right, so you're going to go for a surf today? The surf's good, isn't it?
Yep. There's little waves, and I'm going to go and have a play, and then got a bit of work to do.
Nice to enjoy it. Well, thanks for coming in.
Thanks, Aaron, and thanks again to the Raglan community for all the support. It's been great.